Okay, this is Misery Loves Company, a weekly social reading series hosted by miserytourism.com. Every Friday, we welcome outsider and transgressive authors to come and share their work with us. And and before we started recording, there was an incident involving a spider in my house that was not fully resolved. So if I interrupt someone's reading and just start screaming, or if you see it crawling up my face, just try to ignore it. Anyway, so Rudy's up first tonight. Um, yeah, yeah, Rudy, I think you have a Winamp piece. Let me see here.
Yeah, it's a longer piece. It's probably about 30 minutes of recorded audio. I didn't want to read all that because I am very lazy. And also I put Foley audio effects into it. So I probably ones that I don't think I could feasibly do with my mouth sound. So cool. So for this one, I actually dressed in costume for this one. Uh, Here we go. Oh, is it okay if I screen share?
Absolutely. I don't have to give you the power to screen share, do I?
So before I start, this might get kind of loud in some parts. So I'm going to try to adjust the volume, but might get a little loud. This world is animated. It was conceived long ago by brand necromancers from the California Institute of the Arts. In storyboards, it became concept art that became sculpted basic primitives. It's three-dimensional, 3D. Its aesthetic is Pixar style. This world is killing another less lucky world, Earth 794. It's plugged in there just siphoning life, sucking down those vibrant watts or joules or lightning bolts or whatever. Whatever the case, some poor janitor named Earl is sucking on a joule in computer farm number 34B with nothing but joule glow to light his way, because the boxes serving up the animated world's images just eat power. Kirby. 794 is really cold, since it's been optimized for hot boxes that crush triangles all day like dancing boots in concentration camps. No civilization, no globalization, no vroom vroom of vehicles. Rendering is what's hindering. Look at these workstations. They're blitzkrieg fast. Fuck. Benchmarks so ridiculous you'd think your mama sat on that bench. Animation pipeline. And every living creature on Earth 794. Go Burr. This world is killing a weird mouse named Robert A, who lives in it. It's true. Right at this moment, Robert A, who would rather be called Roberta, wants to fin-e herself, because she was first drawn by the renderers as a mouse with pants, instead of one with a little dress. This is the most salient reason Roberta is presently sad, but this story is present tense for a reason. Other life stuff factors in too, but not really, according to Roberta. Roberta is pretty successful otherwise, according to Roberta. But Roberta is two-dimensional, 2D. Roberta is 2D because she feels like no one, not enough depth. She has a mother who is 3D, a father also, and he's 3D. She lives in her parents' 3D house. Almost every adult is 3D. A lot of 3D people are too symmetrical for Roberta's tastes. Roberta thinks that whatever program makes normal people 3D just copy-paste a bunch of flat cutouts of them next to each other until some rough facsimile of a 3D shape exists. Roberta is absolutely right. The boxes that manifest objective reality are basically just big GPUs used to leverage really, really advanced sketch-based modeling applications. Normies have to try really hard to be unique, because everybody does. They have to take themselves apart with their own tools and put themselves back together imperfectly. Those imperfections give more verisimilitude, a plucked whisker on the left side, a right shoe that's bigger than the left one, an eye taken out. Personhood is both kiln and blender. The process of doing this is difficult and arduous, and includes a lot of finding oneself within some greater file structure Roberta knows. Explorer to C:/users/me/me.object load, except things are never that simple because finding drive is always hard, at least for Roberta. Roberta doesn't want to sit around trying to find things all day. Roberta never lost anything. Roberta is not in employment or training. Roberta doesn't give a about working on meshing with a society that she feels excluded from. That's why Roberta is kind of a loser. That's why Roberta is angry all the time. Well, that and the various conditions described by her therapist, a garden snake, in clinical language, comorbid. Everything is co-something. It's co-op when you're on the couch with friends moving lots of Marios around. Mamma mia! It's codependency when you get carried by others in a cooperative game, such as the game of life. It's co-bane when you're codependent and the couch co-op isn't there to lend you a temporary extra dimension. Most of Roberta's friends are 3D. She knows of very few people who are 2D at 27 years old. 2D people are always hard or impossible to find, mostly because 2D objects moving in 3D space are largely invisible unless you're gazing at them from the right angle. Everybody has some kind of angle. The politicians spew them in rhetorical form. The garden snakes perch on them and sell pills that provide false, fleeting, or limited depth. 2.5D, 3D with rails, little big globalists. Roberta spends a lot of time looking for at 2Ds because she feels alone. 2D is greater than 3D. She wishes she could look cute like an anime girl, Sophie or even Kiki, in a stylish witch hat or a princess's gown. But she looks like Mrs. Frisbee with stubble, or without stubble when she shaves, though even then, ugh. She's even got the ratty cloak, because forget washing clothes. Roberta also spends a lot of time laying in her house making silly or outright unhinged things that interest her. She builds them on her computer in AutoCAD. Afterwards, she prints them with her 3D printer. That is, a fabrication printer, a cube primitive with some tapered edges, if we're talking about what it looks like here, placed within three-dimensional space that prints other, also three-dimensional objects. Yeah, I know. Her favorite thing to make is traps, intricate ones. Totally theoretical, of course. She would never want to harm anyone. Roberta hates people, but she isn't a people herder. Mostly, she hates the world. The game, as Ice-T puts it in the song that beeps more than her mouse-sized phone. This is what she tells herself every night when she snuggles up awkwardly against her 3D body pillow that has a 2D girl on it. She logs into her Autodesk account. Her room is filled with hundreds of spring-loaded machinations, all built with a malice that's scattershot, but also precision. Clockwork. This cube primitive has dimensions of 15 by 15 by 10, and one inset face that has been extruded to add a recess. It is situated over a cylinder primitive measuring 1 by 1 by 17.5, a torus-shaped piece of cheese that has dimensions of 1.8 by 1 by 1.2 rests on the floor plane underneath the box. This piece of rope has dimensions of... Ironic, Roberta says to nobody in a goofy Palpatine voice. She can tinker all day with .dwg files in Inventor, but can't find the drive to tinker with herself. Gosh darn it, Roberta. It's Monday the somethingth, and Roberta is visiting the gatekeeper because she feels in this moment that she needs to transition to 3D. She has felt this way in the past. Her many conditions make this mood big, but ephemeral. The gatekeeper is a huge piece of black obsidian named Galio, he/him, that interrupts people a lot and listens very poorly. Stone doesn't have any ears after all. Galio is the biggest structure in the smoking-free mental health campus. He's even bigger than the pharmaceutical industrial complex, which is a building to his office's rear that's filled mostly with Suboxone SSRIs and people with various degrees, and some who languish in varying degrees of unconsciousness. People say there exists a door somewhere on Galio that opens up when he helps you transition. Some people on Reddit/Do-It-Yourself3D even claim to know where it is. Good luck finding it, you dummies, Roberta subvocalizes as she enters his office. He's like 130 by 30 by 490. That's a lot of space to search. I'm super here for you, Gallio says in a sickly sweet voice that sounds like an amalgam of all the male reporters featured on National Public Radio. We can definitely get this figured out. Roberta wells up almost immediately, becoming spilly and sloshy like the Utah teapot. I can't even feel anything when I hug my parents. How am I supposed to be anything but a fake? She says through messy tears that splash against spiky stubble like Czech hedgehogs meeting the rolling waves on French beaches. Gallio listens, for now. He knows Roberta is one of the biggest whales the campus has, a medication management golden goose. Like the teapot, she's become an in-joke to a cabal of programmers. Why do you think that is? Gallio interjects as Roberta choke hiccups. Because they're complex polygonal structures, and I'm a 2D plane? I see. Gallio is lying, because he has no eyes, nor is he capable of feeling any empathy. I don't know this. Just a second, Gallio stalls. I need to redo your treatment plan. If you could answer just a few of these questions. Nearly every day, for everything. Got it. His heart is stone, but still it trembles. He fills the awkward void between spiels by somehow displaying an emotion that he isn't capable of, because he's a piece of stone, in some novel or metaphorical way, just like I'm filling the space with words that are useless. So, it seems like we need to work on getting your self-image squared away. Oh God, Roberta says furiously, with some exhaustion. Every time I come in here, it's back to the beginning of the maze. This is necessary work, Roberta. It's basic. Once we have that down, we can start the rest of the process, but you have to do this. Lots of soul searching and such. Roberta had been searching. She is searching now. She pictures herself, her sweatpants, her matted brown hair, her file structure. The latter is a complete mess. Downloaded games in My Documents, 400 icons on the desktop, just trash. How is she going to get through meshing, a process where you literally deconstruct your 3D self and reconstruct it to be unique, to be you, if she couldn't even find her me.png, her self-image? But at this point, it could literally be named anything. You.png, them.png, trashfag.png. Now it's 30 minutes into the session and Roberta is feeling stupid, like, why did I come? She's feeling like adding dimensions to herself is just going to add problems, responsibilities that she doesn't want, and extend her life into spaces, social and physical, that she doesn't feel she belongs in. 2x4 are Roberta's dimensions. At this moment, she hates the prospect of adding Z to the mix. Z is for zombie, just like everyone else. Z is boring. I see your gears working, Roberta. What's really on your mind? Roberta lets loose with a rant on everything. Theory of everything. Hybrid theory vibes. She says everything 17 times. She says or implies snakes 15 times. Gallio wants the cock to just jump ahead. Holy cow. He wants someone to adjust it to a time that transports him to a place, like those clever at-risk youth did in The Wire, preferably one that is far from here. Condensation forms on the top of Gallio and runs down his patient-facing side, which is scrawled with the names of everyone who has ever Cobained because of Wellbutrin. During Roberta's uncomfortable rant, a little blue woodpecker lands and starts etching another name onto the list. Okay, so just a second, he says finally. Roberta is still going. Gallio takes on the assertive voice he calls Paul in his highly compartmentalized mind, the one that's half McCartney, half Atreides, and says, slow down. Roberta continues, slower. She's at 12 frames per second now. Come on, Roberta. It's okay. There is strain in her face. Her little mousy features are twitching something powerful, even though she's now only half as animated. Gallio's inscrutable senses catch something. He spins around so that his complex-facing side, which has been polished to the point that it's a black mirror, is now facing Roberta. Slower, he commands. You have a lot of stuff hiding in your in-betweens. 6 frames per second. Roberta looks up, then stares, agape. Between two keyframes that contain tormented facial expressions, she sees an image. Something out of character for her. Out of character for this reality. Her face isn't there. Her body isn't there. A strangely unsettling image. A woman in a bedroom flanked by two large black men is occupying the entirety of the space where Roberta should be. But the people, they're not colored right. No, Roberta isn't prejudiced. What she means, she clarifies mentally, is that their skin tones exist outside of the palettes that she's familiar with seeing. They're less consistent. In what kind of world do people have little blotches of discoloration? And why the mushrooms? Is this what they call... And her little 2D window, her personal space, is just that image. The image has no transparency, it takes up the whole thing. There's no part of Roberta or anything else anywhere. She does a double take. Robert A_blank in the animations library only visible to God and you, the reader. And the image is gone. Slower, Roberta, the gatekeeper drones. She's a languid crawl now, not her usual on oneself, not even on threes, not even on fours. Yikes. Roberta is forced to look at every piece of stubble on her train wreck face. 5 10-second long holds. Then, more images. She sees planes dropping anvils on indeterminately Asian humans. She sees what looks like Nightmare Before Christmas concept art rendered in eye-bleeding definition, and what's this? The snowflake Jack is holding is yellow? The clock on the wall says, "Time's up," and then it's back to the usual 24 for Roberta. Well, I hope we've made some progress here, Gatekeeper Galileo says as he rotates back to his initial position. Roberta is 1 hour older. Roberta is idling. Roberta is still 2D. The artist formerly known as Roberta is now, right this instant at 6:52 p.m. Cartoon Standard Time, engaged in building horrible traps that will drop several anvils on live people. Birdie, her mom, who should probably shut up, queries while rapping against her door. "It's Mousetrap, Mom," comes the terse reply. "Must be role-playing time," her dad says with a smile, en route to his Matchbox recliner in the TV room. Her brother, home on a visit, is cracking up hard. "Robert, hey, you freak," snicker snicker. "You can't really call yourself Mousetrap, because you could never trap anyone. A trap would be able to..." But Mousetrap is undeterred, despite the sounds of war outside. Inside, Cobain is mumbling about Francis Farmer or something. The 3D printer is burning. The hours roll off the clock as she extrudes and bevels away an inventor. Any questions from family are waved away with replies that are curt at best and curt at worst. Tick, tick, tick. Kiki the witch comes out of her little wooden clock on the wall to say midnight in Japanese, just as Mousetrap's brother is forcing the door. A tripwire snags his foot as he tiptoes in with a worried expression on his face, then plop, pie right in the eye. He stumbles sideways and steps onto a rake, which sits up like Undertaker to deliver a savage blow to his forehead. His forehead bleeds. Something sharp on the rake, probably, and when he leans forward, the blood drips off and deposits itself into a petri dish that runs on fast little legs while spinning its cylindrical body like a centrifuge. When the dish reaches its goal, a small box with a petri dish-sized opening, it leaps inside. Brother Identified says after a comically small amount of time that mostly serves to start a dialogue about the inefficiency of New York City forensic crime labs. Shame on them for all those unprocessed rape kits. The box slides across the floor until it bumps into a power strip connected to a television and an Xbox Series 9. Off becomes on. The devices power up, casting light on the face of a man in a wife-beater who fits inside this mouse-sided house because perspective is a fickle mistress, especially when all the images are in your head. He plays Halo Infinite Ultimate Edition. various profanities fall out of his mouth into another box, which sits on a scale, and when the number on the digital display counter reads 69, the scale explodes into shrapnel, a piece of which bounces off a spigot, activating a fire hose that sprays water on Mousetrap's brother. He stumbles to the right, and his foot depresses a pressure plate. This, finally, results in an anvil being dropped on the fattest, dumbest head in this house of mice with stylistically swollen noggins. Stars, tons of them, appear above him and swirl for what seems like too long. Mousetrap brother has lost consciousness and has to be taken to the Mousepital. He'll attend Alcoholics Anonymous at some point. This is the last time he ever tries to interrupt his sister. Ditto for the parents. They create new tunnels inside the house so they don't have to move through the same corridors as Mousetrap, who they rarely see anyway. Anvils are really heavy. It's days, weeks, months later, and Mousetrap is still dropping anvils on people. Around town, in the park, in the houses of worship, at the red carpet, a star-studded affair, at the Comic-Cons, at the sad ball pit with like 4 people in it. Ouch. With every progressive drop, she is becoming a little better at it and a little more evil, like she's the main guy from Diablo who winds up shoving a gem into his skull to contain Great Satan Daddy. Mousetrap is hunting. Today she has her sights set on a cute bug she wants to ensnare to keep as a pet. Spider to be exact, and a big one at that. This boy is thick, unlike her, and comes up to what passes for a chest. The park is the perfect place to catch such a specimen. She sets up her anvil dropper, adjusting the impact of the drop to delicate so as not to make her prey too sore. She steps into a nearby ramen shop to do brunch. She emerges, clean-shaven, chin fur soaked in ramen juices. She returns and checks the trap. Stars are emerging from below the anvil, making a familiar holding pattern. Success! Out of her pocket, she produces a net and draws closer. But there is no spider underneath. As she comes upon the scene, she realizes that the anvil is also levitating. She nudges it with her net, sending it clattering to the rocky ground. This is very bizarre, but what's more unusual is the behavior of the stars. They don't disappear. Mousetrap's brow is on the ceiling. She crouches next to the miniature cosmic parade and watches it all day. The stars never dim. Their ambient glow shines brightly as morning sun becomes afternoon sun, as cloud cover gathers in the pouring rain. Very strange. Eureka! It has been only through diligent probing and prodding that Mousetrap has discovered the secrets of stardust inherent in all things, and by extension, the hidden power of the universe. A little jar full of swirling stars sits next to her, various alligator clips attached to its base. Her 3D printer is busy printing off a special net whose mesh is very fine, not for catching spiders, but for bugs of another kind. Somewhere Michael Faraday is saying, "No fucking way, bro." When it finishes, she dips her net into the jar and carefully plucks out a single star. It bounces furiously inside its prison until she lets it go. The entire room glows yellow gold. Inside the jar, another starlet appears in its stead. The dance continues. Kiki is shouting in Mousetrap's ear, and parents are stirring in the hallway, but who gives a damn about any of that? Roberta's room now looks like a planetarium. She's pulled dozens of stars from the jar by this point. Each time they replenish, as if by, well, you know. Starlight is ubiquitous, oppressive. Mousetrap emerges from her closet with a handheld photometer. She places it inside one of the bouncing celestials. Holy shit. One thing you should never give to a person with a chip on their shoulder is power. Napoleon didn't need power. Hitler didn't need power. Tim the Toolman Taylor didn't... Well, okay, more power. Now that all of Mousetrap's devices had easily renewable, near-infinite sources of power, her hometown got real dangerous. The first thing she did was live out her, and my, fantasy of completely uprooting the well-meaning but completely inept community mental health apparatus. Friday morning, 7 a.m., smoking-free mental health campus. "Oh, hello," says a homeless man who has been dressed in the uniform of a non-denominational service worker. "I'm here to install the new door," the impatient woman at the desk says, with some entitlement, filing this guy as below her social caste as she files her nails and her taxes. on the company's time. Oh yeah, the door. He breathes a sigh of relief as the ray gun at the small of his back slides away. Who's that with you? The woman asks. Before she can look, Mousetrap has already turned to the side, rendering herself invisible. Oh, just, God? The woman rolls her eyes. Clinging to God and their gun, she thinks, buzzing the door. In a couple of minutes, the man and the trap are in the gatekeeper's office setting up a machine-assisted, star-powered slingshot that generates enough torque to make Johnny Knoxville say something really fucking stupid. An activation release is rigged to the doorknob with a pulley, and the sling is slung around Gatekeeper Gallio, the big man in his cell, who is currently napping. Now, the intention of this device is, in Mousetrap's mind, to punish the intern whose job it is to wake Gallio and get him ready for his morning duties, powering him up, booting him if necessary, yoga for an hour, etc. Punish them, to be clear, by throwing the whole of the Gatekeeper's mass at their face/body. What actually happens is that Mousetrap forgets her ray gun in the office and decides to go back for it, thinking that she can open the door just enough to... Oops. In an instant of terror, the trap triggers and some 400 tons of gatekeeping is flung a little farther than expected. Mousetrap narrowly avoids the stony clinician's girth and shards of his large office door as it careens through the office space at rapid speed, demolishing most of the buildings before hitting a parked car. But it doesn't end there. God, who probably never expected anything so big to move so quickly, scratches his head for a moment and then says, well, that car isn't going to stop an out-of-control black monolith. So it doesn't. Gatekeeper Gallio keeps going for some 5,500 miles, cutting a swath through this town, and the next, sinking slightly into the ground as he travels. And when he reaches Albuquerque, he doesn't turn left, because he can't stop. He simply destroys it in what the mayor later calls an act of boldly partisan federal overreach. And that's all, folks. But wait, I say as the curtains close on this narrative of sweet revenge. Wait, Mousetrap thinks, because she's my character, but also because she's legitimately intellectually curious, something I, your narrator, probably won't ever be. What are the limits of these magic stars? Can I just have as many of them as I want? The answer, it turns out, is yes, but, which is a phrase that helps many tabletop role-playing game GMs contain burgeoning power creep, or at least make it narratively interesting. One day, Mousetrap just spends all her waking hours pulling little stars out of the jar with her net. She doesn't use them to power any devices, she just leaves them in the alcoves and nooks and crannies of her parents' mousehole. Pretty soon she's got like 1,000 starlets in her room looking like a Disney Channel exec's totally platonic barbecue/designer bathing suit, costumes, but only for hosts, party. That's a mouthful. Anyway, weird things start to happen. The walls in Mousetrap's room disappear. That's not to say they stop holding up the house. Structural integrity is maintained. But they are just like blinked out of reality. Strangely, she can still see the corridors that run through the place. It's like she can see through everything, into every room. But there's more. Most of the things in the rooms are invisible too. The floor is there, yeah, but many household objects have vanished. She can see into her parents' room, from her own bedroom. And there's the parental nest, and the little covers that go on top of it. There's the depression where her parents should be. There's the bedpost banging against the wall, and hello, flanking. Mousetrap stumbles outside. Some buildings around her house are just gone. Poof. Some streetlights too. The cars that go by cast light from their headlights, but that's the only sign that they're present at all. Weird, she thinks, as she's almost stepped on by a disembodied shoe that has no foot in it, and no person attached to that foot. All Roberta K. Rat ever did was exacerbate problems, and Mousetrap is no different. It's the next day. So far, she has pulled 7,390 stars out of the jar. This world is in twilight. 3D people walk around bumping into each other because they can't see themselves, let alone anyone else. They stay at home wrapped in invisible 3D sheets. They cry invisible 3D tears. Mousetrap sits with an invisible cup in her room, and drinks these tears, laugh my ass off. Granted, the cup is invisible because it's a mental construct, not because of whatever is making the other tangible things in the world imperceptible. Standing before the last visible mirror in her house, Mousetrap peers into herself. Hey, Toonie Roberta is still kicking. And is she gaining a bit of Z? Nah. Things come and go, mostly go. She misses her parents. The final thing to disappear is her beloved 3D printer. She is overcome and lies flat on her stomach for like 3 days. Now she's beyond the sight of even God, though possibly not Satan, since he'd be looking up at the front side of her 2D plane. She wonders where all the other 2Ds are. She stands up, opens her no-show window, and serenades the encroaching night with her version of Somewhere Out There, which sounds like, hey, are there any 2Ds who want to chill, no Netflix, just cuddle, forever? Surely there must be other 2D people out there. Maybe I just don't have the right angle, she thinks. She goes to a different window as the sun sets, reiterating her sermon into the departing volumetric fog. No reply. She sees no one, hears nobody. Now, at 10:30 p.m. Cartoon Standard Time, a time when it would be dark anyway, Roberta gathers up as many stars as she can carry. They bloom brightly, so bright it's blinding, but their shine has no surfaces except Roberta's person to illuminate. There is no pretense of walls or anything anymore. Roberta can just walk endlessly from here to Timbuktu if she wanted to. But where are all the 2Ds at? I'll make a new world, she says, thinking, if you build it, they will come. Then she proceeds to tinker for 3 whole days with reconstructing the insides of Howl's Moving Castle's titular estate using star stuff, which seems to be the only stuff remaining. On day 3, she gives up because it's hard. Recreating a 2D anime movie in 3D space is hard. Drawing is hard. Finding the drive to do anything is hard. Wait. Never mind. Earl, the senior custodial technician of Earth 794, is done with this bullshit. He has to get up at dark 30 to unfuck these damn boxes in 34B. Box's show is running hot. Show is warm in here. Damn. The boxes are under maximum load with GPU pipeline crashes imminent. That's what Boss Man says. Jargon to old Earl. Can't they just let a man enjoy being toasty? Everything goes dark when he flicks the reset switch. Darker than black. 15 damn minutes a night. His jewel keeps his soul and lower face alight during this time. After the reset, the room is bathed in its usual blue-green hue. Lights from the boxes. Earl exhales menthol goodness and blinks. There is a huge rat, portly sumbitch, warming itself underneath one of the boxes. He can't tell if the rat is male or female, but his show is big, so he says, "I'ma get you, Mr. Captain," and picks up his broom. He takes aim and lets loose, swinging for the fences. Jackie. I mean, yeah, he fucking crushes that rat. 1956 World Series, bottom of the second. The crowd erupts. Rip. There's blood all over the floor on one of the boxes. Earl has overperformed. Probably gonna need a stain remover to get this mess up. Shit. It takes Earl 10 minutes to get the drive to toss the rat into his rolling waste bin. Getting the Clorox might be another 5. "Hey, Earl," says a voice from behind. Ray, his supervisor, is leaning over his shoulder, glancing at the stain. Earl almost had a damn heart attack. The biggest one. But Ray was cool, though. How big that sumbitch was. Ray's smirk is endearing, even in the gloom. Well, I reckon about... Earl stretches his 2 index fingers apart an eyeballed rat's length. Yeah, about that size, lengthwise. Thick as fuck, Ray says, slapping his buddy on the back. Me oh my, Earl says jovially as his gut rumbles.
But there were still 2 minutes left. What was it?
But
What's the
it was
missing
just the
2 minutes
playout.
of audio?
It's the after credits, right? That's where Thanos shows up. Like I said, I apologize for how long that was. That was yeah.
No, that was awesome. But before I talk about it, that the real serendipity here, because the spider came back.
I saw it. Yeah.
Story, and and I had my own little slapstick encounter it got away again. But
It got away.
I love that there's a moment in the story. By the way, not Adolf Hitler is in the waiting room, which I'm sure we'll
nice.
know. But I love that there was a moment in this slapstick story about her trying to catch a spider, given like what's going on. There is these weird moments of serendipity in Misery Loves Company. But anyway, man, this is awesome. Man, I was trying to count how many Kurt Cobain puns you slipped in there. I love the like Kurt at best or Kurt at worst. I think that was my favorite of them. But no, man, this is like everything that's great about your writing, right? And it's good that you finally did like a real cartoon piece, because like cartoons are such a major inspiration for a lot of what you do. And of course, like I don't think I've heard a story about like gender dysphoria told in exactly this way, right? Like because it takes it is 100%. Like you could imagine the opposite of this story, right? One where it's like set in a like cartoon universe, and one of the characters has what's essentially gender dysphoria, and that's like the serious theme here, right? But instead it's treated as just like another element of the slapstick universe, right? It's these like human experiences are made slapstick instead of the humanity making the thing overwrought or whatever. And there are just so many like, I love what you did with the fucking soundtrack too, and the moments of like reality creeping into the soundtrack. I don't know, the whole thing is just like wonderfully constructed. And I don't know why, but I fucking totally lost my shit at Alcoholics Anonymous. I think because there was another mouse pun right before that, and that one was funny. Okay, but I didn't. Just the sheer like the second step of the joke and the sheer like inappropriateness and unexpectedness of that was so funny.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for letting me read it.
Fucking awesome.
Yeah. It was weird to make it because like the part where the piano music like slows down is kind of a pain in the butt to make and fucking and the thing. But I think I synced it pretty decently. But I wonder, I just have a question. Did the ending make sense? Like did it make sense what actually destroyed or kind of eliminated the world there?
I mean, like her exit from the world, right?
Not necessarily the exit, but like what do you think made the world like stop, come unhinged? That's what I was just wondering if that came through.
I mean, her removing the like, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, this was my first time hearing it, so I'm not 100% sure. What did you see it as?
Well, the thing with this, somebody I think got it basically, like the simulation reset. Yeah, like
Gotcha.
yeah. I mean that I did, but what I was going for is basically like those stars, like because she was able to generate an unlimited number of them. They're in like a computer simulation.
Oh, she pushed it past like the buffer.
Yeah, and because like it stops rendering 3D objects, it she's the only thing left in the world because she's two-dimensional. But yeah, I don't know.
Gotcha.
It was just stupid little thing. Again, I apologize.
It makes sense to me, especially like when you said like, and she was like very introspective, which your narrator would never be, or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And also, I just added the E right now to this.
Oh, okay. What is that?
Alcoholics Anonymous.
Oh. I couldn't see it because the letters were backwards on my screen.
Oh, sorry.
Oh man, fuck yeah.
Yeah, no, that was awesome, man. That was awesome, man. And I wouldn't like necessarily go in and like clarify anything because I was listening and not reading along because of the screen share. So I'm not sure if that was just like an
Oh, okay.
element that didn't like 100% click over for me because it was being read as opposed to like seeing it on the page, right? Like I'd look at it on the page before I would necessarily like go through and like edit anything.
And
Yeah, no, that
I was late, so I'm so excited to read it for all the Kurt Cobain puns that apparently are there. I'm fucking psyched.
Kurt.
All right. Well, thank you, Rudy. And Jesse is up next. And I think Mr. Bones might be hunting the spider now, or maybe he's just waiting for the food to turn over.
How big is the spider?
I mean, it's you know, it's not huge. It's not tiny, but it's also not huge. Maybe about that big.
Is it thin or?
No, it's like one of those terrible, like hairy kind of spiders. I don't.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's a pretty repulsive looking thing.
The thick boy.
Oh god, because I lost my trusty not couch closet spider. But anyway.
All right, Jesse, it's all yours.
Okay, there's my link.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat.
All right. This is a short story called Noah Turbo Photographer. And the publishers put a picture of a guy with a camera. Noah Turbo has been infused with William Burroughs' Wilhelm Reich decocted orgasm theory, and he overdosed on dextromethorphan, which he burned the chemical diagram of at Bill W.'s grave in Massachusetts. The dorm corridors the night Noah died were all squiggly like parabolas, and part of the bargain with God in this near-death scenario was that he had to take conscious control of all his biological life processes that normally your autonomic brain just handles for you. Heartbeat, breathing, everything. He had to do it all on dextromethorphan, weed, and lots of no-dos, which he stupidly took to enhance the experience. He kept himself breathing by walking around the college campus at 2 a.m. If Noah was going to drop dead, he wanted to do it in front of the health center. He found that whistling the Mr. Ed theme song over and over again was sufficient to take his mind off the fact that he was going to slip up and miss a heartbeat or breath and die. No matter where he walked, sidewalk, lawn, wherever, his open grave followed him everywhere underfoot, the same way personal, dark rain clouds follow overhead the doomed cartoon character going from place to place. No escape. After about 8 or 9 hours, the grave faded away. Noah developed a thing for archaeological MILFs. He got it from looking at his little brother Ralph's books years after Ralph died. Ralph had a big collection of kids' academic books for a 9-year-old when he passed away. History, science, mythology. In the old books, perhaps overlooked by Ralph, perhaps not, there was an attractive display of erotic art from millennia ago. Time mother I'd like to fuck, Noah thought, flipping through the pages in Ralph's empty bedroom. The dancing Apsara, sky goddess, can twerk and get it. Bare-chested Minoan snake goddesses were stacked up to the ceiling. Goddesses and maidens, baubles around their hips, while frozen, you could almost see the motion of, the twist of, long dead bodies. Necrophilia forgiven in the slipstream of artistic time. Noah found himself a job as a fashion photographer at a runway show for post-apocalyptic child brides in agricultural sector District 12. Teenage girls smeared with dirt, wearing long train dresses made of plastic wrapping agricultural garbage, the fibrous material they wrap silage in. The runway was in a field next to a deep forest, between 2 long rows of hay bales where the rural glitterati sat, in on a vast secret those toiling down in the Catskill towns had no knowledge of. Noah had his camera. A guy played the drums off to the side, a tribal jazz frenzy. It was said that he played with Hendrix once. These were like the anti-dairy princesses. drop dead gorgeous, but it spoke of how we were all going to starve and die in the aftermath, and the tribal chieftain thing would swing into place. Polygamy, human sacrifice, a weird focus between the rural and the cultural refugees from the urban center, which lay smoking in radioactive ash just 3 hours away. Farm dudes had pulled a pile of old Christmas trees into a pile the size of St. Patrick's Cathedral away from the runway, and when it got to dusk, they set the thing on fire. It went up in seconds and produced volcanic heat felt many yards away. Noah took photos. He went behind a row of tractor tires and interviewed the promoter and the fashion designer in the firelight. They only had a few minutes to talk like it was a Balenciaga show or something. The promoter was janky. He was this ripped, hulking gay guy. He ran a model agency in the sticks, finding fresh young faces among the farm kids. He was notorious and predatory. The fashion designer was of the creative class of cultural refugee women who came to the mountains from the city and tried to infuse the locals with hipster freshness. It's this whole thing. He asked her about the apocalypticism of the clothing, the tattered garments, and she said, "I don't know what you're talking about." It was in this way that he learned, a crashing realization into his recesses where he believed things, that the apocalypse had not happened yet, at least not outside of anybody's minds. This sort of thing happened a lot with Noah Turbo. The imagination was like a powerful wave that knocked only him over. Everybody else became buoyant and rose and fell with the ocean water and landed on their feet. They stood in the correct zone to survive the pulses. Relieved again from the shadows of Mount Doom, Noah was near the makeshift bar set into a recess in the forest by the bonfire, drinking a craft beer among the post-runway crowd when he saw her, one of the models. She had changed out of the flowing trains of plastic and twine into jean shorts that were slightly demurer than Daisy Dukes and a light green t-shirt, advertising a bowling alley several townships over, where Noah had gotten straight strikes on his better nights. She had black hair and one of those cruelly beautiful faces that she emulated from what she'd no doubt seen on models in magazines and TV. Everyone else was a subservient creature in her eyes. She was looking around herself in a forbidding way and checking her phone. He didn't know if they had service up here in the dark mountains. She looked slightly older than the other models, and he recalled she had worn the most daring of the trash necklines, bodice barely kept together. Nobody approached her. She was alone by the bonfire. It was like she was waiting for someone to talk to her and simultaneously warding it off any interaction from men. Noah walked by her as if headed elsewhere to the field when he stopped. He made like he had just noticed her. She was a natural outcropping of crystal that was camouflaged and easily overlooked in the dark woods. "Can I take your picture?" he asked, brandishing the camera. She looked up from the fairy glow of her phone screen at him with eyes of dark preoccupation. "Didn't you already?" She gestured at the empty runway. "I didn't get all your angles." "That's hard to believe. I went out like 3 times." "Also, your vibe has changed. You seem less unearthly now. Stand in the firelight." Her expression was slightly pissed, but she moved anyway. Her exasperation was studied, like this post-runway atmosphere was unfamiliar territory even for a hot woman, and she was trying on a mood. He raised the camera. She was lit up orange by the fire and semi-consciously held the phone up by her shoulder, posing, the fairy tale aura of the lit-up phone unintentionally casting half her face in contrasting blue light. Techno-mythical. "Beautiful," Noah said. "What publication are you with?" she asked, rippling with suspicion. "Local paper is doing a summer style insert this month." "Oh, so it's local? Is that bad?" "I just didn't know if you were from the city." "Not yet," Noah said, leaving a pathway open for his own notional fame and power in her mind, not knowing the receptivity, confidence building. He snapped another picture and she moved her body slightly, her face taking on expressions of jaded surprise, assurance, the universal, flickering female face language of models. "I'm Noah." She listened to this name. weighing it on the same scales that favorably dipped under the avoirdupois of biblical male hipster names like Jonah, Moses, Ezra. I'm Lolene, she said. The scales in his mind tipped sharply, white trash like the outfit she had shed. He saw Appalachian ruggedness in her, the reaching out of the country girl for city trappings, the shifting passageways of escape they all felt and had to correctly time their crossings through. She had made it this far. What got you into this? He asked, circling slightly so the fire was to his back, keeping her out of his shadow. He had to ask her age soon, next go around or two, obligation. He was already feeling sketchy about the runway photos, that iffy zone of the models' ages. Adrian saw me at a honky-tonk, Lillian said. So you're 21, he asked, trying to keep the rustle of sexual acquisition out of his voice. 23, she said. An obstacle had been hurdled, and a whole annex of his tense mind mansion, peopled with judging women like his sister Dawn, dissolved. Adrian is the talent scout. Yeah, he's a doll. Big doll, action figure with karate grip. You're more of a doll than he is. Photographers are supposed to say that. Can I get you a drink? A long pause. How do you know I'm not already drunk? Lillian asked. You look steady to me. They went to the Woodland Bar where the bartender, a Tolkien character from the Mines of Moria in a lumberjack shirt, made her a martini that was pure class. What are you doing? Waiting for someone? He asked her. They sat down next to each other on a log. The camera was hanging around his neck like a certificate allowing entry to a hermetic fantasy court. Its time had passed. Don't you have an after party to go to? They exchanged numbers. He saw her at another exclusive get-together, a local anti-wind turbine activist from the days before wind energy was politically recommended, was having a book release party at a remote location. Lolene had invited Noah as a kind of challenge that was both social and geographical. He had to find his way there in the dark. Everything happened at night in those mountains. A microphone had been set up in a large living room that seemed like it could have been a gallery in a railroad museum Noah would have gone to as a school kid, all wood and iron and glass cases. He didn't know who lived there. He didn't know anybody. The Catskills are full of exclusive nooks and crannies, strange people hiding out in crevices with no particular desire to be found by those one valley over. They limited their exposure to a select few. Noah felt blessed by excess, knowing it could all slip away, a magical encounter with a rare animal among the lichen-splashed boulders on a hike, ending with one false step of his, twig snap, spooking the ideal off into the woods. Lolene was dressed like a biker chick who was just getting introduced to watching foreign films. Gypsy fortune teller headdress, boots of Spanish leather, country cool. Talking with a nest of hip older women sitting in a cluster of furniture by a glass case full of stuffed birds. Noah joined the conversation like he belonged. One of the older women held a spider. There you go, spider. Lolene scanned him with eyes of unearned sophistication that he wanted to damage, not physically, not outwardly aggressively, but through a relationship maneuver, putting her in her place so that he could comfortably be with her. Noah made the mistake of saying, there's a lot of estrogen in this room, to the hip women who bristled. Lolene and Noah sat in wooden chairs next to each other, and he held her hand like they had been together for weeks. A few cabaret acts happened, recitations, and tinkling percussive accompaniments on glasses and spoons and accordions. Noah thought it was some kind of a time warp to Catskill Bohemia from decades past. The activist got up, sat behind the desk, and read from a new collection which was heavy on manic depressive puns, verbal associations like what Kay Redfield Jameson talked about in Touched by Flame, her book on bipolar disorder and creativity. Putin on the Ritz, like Vladimir. Copies of the book were passed out for free, but only if you provide an honest review. The end papers were stylized floor plans of the second floor at Bassett Hospital in Cooperstown, the psych ward, which Noah recognized having spent 2 hellish weeks there in 2010. He had been in that very room next to the phone. He remembered irritably taking incoming phone calls because no one else would answer. He once said the phone call was for one of the lionesses who ran the psych ward through informal charisma of insanity. She said, "Tell them I'm not here," to which he yelled at her that he would not lie for her. The crowd at the reading in the mountains reset, remixed, jumbled, and he lost Lolene because he wanted to give her casual space. She must have left without warning, some rude tactic to create mystery. He was stuck with the spider estrogen women who he quizzed about Lolene, but they stonewalled him, disapproving. He bumped into her again in the Price Chopper parking lot in one of the rural sub-metropolises of the Catskills. He followed him to the pharmacy where upstate Okies waited for sketchy prescriptions. "This is silly," he said. "We live in the same county. Why did you abandon me there?" She told him some bullshit about how she got an emergency phone call. "I didn't want to bother you with my crazy life." "It's no bother." He met her gambling addict parents who lived in a house full of cats and New York Giants flags. They went to play tennis on the courts at the park, where he let off whole aquariums worth of sweat and had scary knee incidents. She made fun of his forehand. They went back to her house and played ping pong in her basement, big picture, mini picture. He brought to her house Academy Award screeners of The Hobbit Part 3 he'd gotten from a movie maker neighbor of his parents who was a member of the Academy, screeners with grave warnings that these were not to be shared with anybody, were property of the Hollywood studio, were in fact meant to be destroyed after one viewing. Lolene openly sat on Noah's lap while they watched The Hobbit with her parents on a TV screen as big as the ping pong table downstairs. They drive around in his Volvo to go parking. They disappeared into the Catskill Park on a remote trail near Phoenicia, where they made out and she gave him a handy, moaning, "Messy Noah," in his ear after he climaxed in his jeans. When he turned the key in the ignition, the car gave a sputtering, exhausted wheeze like when his mom died in the hospital, and the dashboard flickered for a few seconds. They were way out there in the woods, no cell service to call AAA. As if on cue, a black bear approached the car out of the forest and began circling it. Noah wanted to ask Lolene what to do because her first name was more rural than his. She would know. "Don't you have like bear spray in your bag?" he asked. "I never go out where there might be bears. One of my cats got eaten by a wolf once." The bear set up shop next to the Volvo and began pressing on it like it was a stuck shopping cart. Lolene huddled with Noah and put her face in his chest, crying, terrified. He took out his phone, put on the flash, and began taking pictures of the bear through the window. He was a bear paparazzi. This took a few agonizing, unbearable minutes of suspense. The bear, after being dazzled with flashes, decided this was all too strange and went back off into the forest. Once it had been gone for about 20 minutes, Noah and Lolene staggered out of the car and began hurrying down the road the way they came. It was pure darkness, and they used up their batteries lighting the way with their phones. Living things croaked and grunted from the woods as they passed, watching them with careful vigilance. The two humans made it to the main road where they flagged down a large tank of a white van driven by a wealthy painter who'd moved upstate 17 years ago. The man repeated this more than once as he spoke to them, as if proving bona fides. They went to Phoenicia and found a phone at a restaurant where a jazz quartet was playing. They got the car back the next day. Tony Larry, Noah's mechanic friend, went out to fix the abandoned car, saying it was the electrical harness. Lolene had split. Noah wasn't sure if he'd ever see her again. Close calls with death were supposed to sexually bind you to your fellow survivor, he'd heard. Maybe Lolene was put together different. "See, a bear was after you?" Tony Larry asked once the car was started. "Yeah," Noah said, getting out his phone to show the photos. "Take a look at this." He held the phone out to Tony Larry, who looked puzzled. I don't see any bear. These are the last pictures you took? Yes, let me see. Looking through his roll, there were no pictures of any bear. Instead, pushing on the outside of the window, faces inches away from Loline's in the edge of the frame, his eyes flared red with the flash, was New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo. He wore a suit and tie and a New York State pin. In the pictures, the elected official was showing his teeth. I'll be damned, Noah said. He held the phone at varying distances from his eyes, trying to see if it was a trick of the light. Photo after photo of Andrew Cuomo. You know, I didn't vote for him, Tony Larry said. Albany's too corrupt. Needs to be cleaned out. He needed to get with Loline to verify his story. This kind of thing happened to Noah all the time.
Jesse, oh, Rudy's clapping, but so Jesse, even without that ending, this would have been an incredible story. I would have loved this story, but the ending is so surreal and funny and beautiful and so in step with everything that's come before. One thing I really dig about this piece is the fact that even though you tell us paragraph 1, this dude at one point in time took too many psychedelics and it fried his brain, the story keeps lulling us into a sense of like security and complacency, right? Until there's another moment where you're like, oh right, this guy's brain is fried, this guy is nuts. Like I loved like the apocalypse moment where like he's imagining that he's existing in this post-apocalyptic world and he gets so wrapped up in it, and then he has to be reminded that he's not. And what I found myself questioning that reality, right? Questioning the reality of the story and getting drawn in again and again into this character's psychosis. And it's just such a great character study, and the way this is like the luxurious prose and all the like novel and idiosyncratic details complement it. It's mesmerizing. It's a really fucking good piece, Jesse. And the ending, I'm going to be thinking about the ending for a while.
Thank you.
I wrote something in chat, but also like that's everything you just said is exactly like the stuff I love to read. Like, yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Iris.
Yeah. Oh, actually, Jesse, I have a question.
Yes.
When did you write this? Did you write this before or after Cuomo's scandal?
After.
Oh, okay.
I needed something to nail down that this was happening in New York State, you know?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Where I live, everybody talked about Cuomo and he was a big monster.
Yeah.
To some people in my county, and that's where that kind of came from.
It's great.
I submitted this to rejection letters when Kyle Seibel, however you pronounce his last name, who I like, he was sort of the guest editor, and he rejected it for that reason. It was very nice, but he said it's too much like a punchline to have it end that way.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so at all.
Brutal.
I love.
I mean, he was
Kyle.
very nice about it. He was not being a jerk, but.
No, I understand that. And I love Kyle. We've published him, I think we've published him at least once. He's responsible for one of the stories that has gotten the most traffic of anything we've published.
Yeah, he's cool. I like him.
But I don't agree with him about this point. If it was a different kind of story, I might agree with him. But the way like that surreality and the question of what is or isn't real, what's a function of this guy's fried perspective and what isn't, is woven throughout this story. The ending, I think, is entirely in keeping. And it's kind of like one of those like Sopranos cut to black moments where you've convinced yourself this guy is just nuts. And then it's like, wait a second, somebody else sees it too, right? Like, or like, oh wait, meaning that like the reader is implicated. We see it too, and we don't know in that moment like what's real and what isn't. And like I said, it could be a punchline in a different story. I mean, it is a punchline on some level, but that's a good thing. This is a story that is where it's totally appropriate for it to end on a punchline like that. I think. I don't know. I don't know.
I think it was really great and really immersive.
Thank you.
Yeah, as far as the punchline thing, like I don't I'm not really sure of how that's supposed to be like a bad thing, but the story doesn't, it leads into it a lot, because one thing is that you can see it was written by someone from like the North Country or upstate New York, basically.
Yeah.
Because all like the thing with the bears, like, I mean, I know up here, near Malone, I think in Chattagay, is a town probably 10, 15 minutes from us. There used to be a dump, and people would go there and like because bears would come to the dump, and people would go there and take fucking pictures with the bears of their kids, like,
Fuck yeah, I remember that.
yeah, right. So no, like it reads very much like a story that is from here, and that Cuomo thing obviously comes from that type of, you can see where it's coming from if you've been
Yeah.
here. I mean, definitely. No,
And
that was
Price
absolutely
Chopper.
amazing. Price Chopper, fuck yeah.
Yeah. The Price Chopper in Malone closed that, or no, it's still
No,
open.
it's open.
It's open.
Yeah.
Okay. But
What is Price Chopper? I'm in California.
Supermarket.
It's just a grocery
Oh.
supermarket.
anyway,
Thanks,
so-
everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And Dan's next.
Hello. These are just a set of, well, there's 3 or 4 themed poems and then one that's not on the theme, but the first 4 are about the character of Golem, which is from Jewish mythology. First one's called Golem of the Sea. Golem said nothing past clay lips, the bottom of the ocean for centuries, shit on by crabs scuttling past, it resting till that feeling came about. The electricity burning through its flesh, the rod, whomever held it, its guardianship bestowed upon them. Rising above the seafloor, a swirling brown mist, an underwater dervish, startling schools of fish, the magnetic pull of that plain iron rod. Whomever found it this time would not believe what was headed for them. This is called Golem of the Beach. A small mud pile grew where the water broke against sand. The beach full of people gasping at the daemon. Golem, knowing human fear, put his hands up. A woman fainted. Children cried. The bravest men rushed to stop Golem from existing. The bravest man struck Golem's stomach, and his hand disappeared into the clay. Golem spun, flinging the man 50 feet into the water. The other men realized bravery had limits and backed away. They whispered to a god that did not hear them. Golem was forgotten before any of them lived. Orphaned by time, the rabbi's black magic outlived him, but there will always be a new master to serve. Remembering shame, Golem stole a towel and covered himself. This one's called Golem Discovers Himself. Golem speaks only in vowels, his mouth agape on stage, him in a microphone. No man could take the sound, but he hit that low bass tone that women love. They undressed him with their eyes, only to find he was clay all the way down. One dark-haired got a little too drunk and took Golem home with her. He barely fit into the elevator. In bed, she said, "No man's your equal. You are molded into whatever is needed." She took 2 handfuls of Golem's body and rolled it into a turgid cylinder. This one's called Golem Waits. Golem waits for the one worthy to follow. He waits on the sidewalk. Dogs pee on him. Birds build nests under his chin. People walk around him like he is some lamppost. Golem waits for the day the lion returns, wielding the rod of control. Golem waits, like everyone else, on dead men. Golem and the father. If Golem was ever born, he'd twist in the womb until the umbilical cord was firmly around his neck. If Golem was ever a child, he'd be too large to bully or kidnap or spank. How do you punish what has no will? If Golem was ever a teen, he'd be the first to find a dead body bloated by some remote stretch of train tracks. If Golem ever crossed into adulthood, he'd smile a toothless smile, knowing God was no longer his father. It's called The Bridge at Dumbarton. The bridge at Dumbarton took our hearts, and we watched the river carry them away, our backs straight with hands at our sides, shivering while the crowd cheered, seagulls circling overhead, hands shot in the air, tracking the birds diving past our noses, landing with the crowd squawking. The man in the white had his hands on our shoulders. The birds dug their toes in trembling red flesh, stuck their beaks in the aorta, and drank. When the creature is full and the blood in the water fades, you will no longer feel the cold, he whispered. Our faces turned to stone while the adults applauded our christening, this heartless circle. How much did they pay the man in white? How much did they pay the birds for this honor? We wondered. That's it.
Oh man, Dan, I love this cycle of Golem poems because I think I was talking about this with the last set of poems that you read, but I love like this movement in your recent poems where like they're at once like, yeah, they're works of fantasy or they're works of genre, right? But they're so like deeply rooted in the modern and the contemporary and the like existential. And you never, these pieces are so beautiful because just when you think, in the Golem poems, especially when it's going to tilt more to one side or the other, it's like it doesn't, right? It moves back. And it's like the the tradition modernity thing, right? Like whenever you start to think, oh, these are modern existential poems, or these are a kind of like with the couple of middle poems, which are like funnier poems, these are a kind of like modern satire of like, of like the myth of the golem, right? There's a line or a movement that will pull it back in the direction of like myth and poignancy. And when you start to worry it might be moving too much in that direction, there's like something funny and light and modern and subversive thrown in there. And the way you move back and forth within these poems, oh my God, and some of the lines, the final line, oh my God, the final, I guess, 2 lines of Golem waits, the Golem waits like everyone else on dead men, is oh God, that hits so hard and is so devastating. Like both knowing the myth and knowing like we all fucking go through, right? I don't know. These are fantastic. These are fantastic.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Will.
And the Golem poems in particular are fantastic in a way that I think might be a really good fit for Misery Tourism. I don't want to speak for Rudy here, but he was plotting. I don't know, the mix of fantasy and like dark existential stuff and like satire, it feels very Misery Tourism to me. But maybe you have a different home in mind. But
when do you guys open for subs?
July 1st, 3 weeks. 3 weeks from today.
I mean, I wrote those probably about 15 years ago, so I think they can wait 3 weeks.
Yeah, they've been waiting, like the Golem, they've been waiting for a while already, so why not?
So there's a line that I like, I want to point out, you're molded into whatever is needed. And the context of that line is so good because it's like, well, like, 1,000 or however many years, thousands of years ago, whatever, was molded to defend Prague or something. But now it's like, hey, like, it's, to do sex or whatever.
Yeah, now he's a sex toy. Yeah.
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 That's really good. I like that. That's really powerful.
I really love the myth of the Lion of Prague and like all of Golem, like basically facing down like a bunch of like pissed off villagers and shit and defending a synagogue. Like that whole image is very like 300, except there's just one clay thing that just does whatever it's asked to do.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it's super cool. That's a cool myth to like just the ideas of servitude and stuff that it conjures and stuff. And that is really, really, really done really good.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Up next is Keith.
Okay, thanks, William. And thanks everybody for listening. So tonight I'm going to share a personal autofiction story. It's titled Boogie Nights, Late 70s. In midsummer in Northwest Florida, the evenings cool down. The day's heat radiates from the earth and the land breeze begins. As the skies begin to darken, low towering clouds can be seen resting along the southern horizon. In the early evening, they are illuminated by occasional flashes of heat lightning as the day's warmth evaporates from the land. Overhead, clear skies begin to reveal the brighter stars and planets. The crickets and frogs are quiet. All signs point to no rain. The moonrise will not be until the early morning. It will be a dark night. If we're lucky, by midnight, only the Milky Way will be looking down at us. The prince and the princess both feel the energy in the air. The one-lane woods road winds its way through the pines, just wide enough for the F-100 to negotiate. The prince is the gatekeeper, and only he has the keys to the kingdom. At least that is what he would like to think. In his mind, the light turns green, and he proceeds down the trail. When the destination is reached, the vista is spectacular. Who would believe this is Florida? It's almost like being in the mountains. In his head, his princess is impressed. He looks to see the expression on her face. It's blank. But hell, he's not out to impress. Take me for what I am or don't take me at all. Now it's time to get down and get this party started. It's time to boogie down. But first, he really wants to tell her about his 1975 Ford F-100. Well, it's not his because it's a company truck, but she knew that something was up when he didn't pick her up in his 76 Ford Maverick. He tells her that he never takes his car off the blacktop roads. Besides, the F-100 is really a piece of work. It even has a dealer-installed AC that cools like that Siberian Express that rolled through here back in January. He continues, you know, most people don't think it ever gets cold here because it's Florida. But if they really think that, then why don't they come to our beaches in January? They laugh at us and think that we're just a bunch of backwood nincompoops. You just wait. A few years from now, we'll be the ones laughing. When he looked into her eyes for a reaction, he saw his own eyes looking back. He continues his soliloquy. Now, you know, with this F-100, there's no console, no back seat, no carpeting, no power features, no four-wheel drive. This is a real truck. Even the individual rubber floor mats come out easily to access the floorboard drain plugs. That works really great for draining the water after a deep creek crossing. Does she appreciate that secret? That's a very nice feature. He can just spray the mud out with a hose pipe and it all goes out the drain holes. And by the way, the AM radio works, but on Saturday nights, it's all Grand Ole Opry country music, he tells her. Unless he can get lucky and pick up Fort Wayne, Indiana, he'll just have to feel things out. He thinks to himself, the radio's risky. The battery may run down, and it's a long walk out of the woods. But just in case, he's got a set of jumper cables in the toolbox. And sometimes the gears hang up because the baling wire holding the three on the tree together breaks. But she doesn't need to know that. If he's lucky tonight, his battery will stay charged and all the gears will shift properly. Everything will work. Everything. The little playmate is well stocked and sits on the floorboard at their feet. A few King of beers and a couple of Coca-Colas are iced down. On the seat, inside a paper sack, is a pint of Jack Daniels. No Jim Beam in this new life. And yes, he's even got 2 red Solo cups, and the loose ice will work just fine. He's thought of everything. You never fail to impress, she whispers softly. This is only our first date, he says. How do you know? Have you heard something about me? Oh no, I really don't know anything about you except that you play golf sometimes and you've had a hole-in-one. And my friend says that you're really good. Back to business. The mood is set. The time is right. Cool, clear skies and smooth sailing. Time to let the tailgate down and move to the dance floor. Together they exit the cab, out the driver's door, stepping down into the pine needles and bahia grass, and he's hoping there are no snakes or fire ants or spiders or yellow jacket nests. All's good as they head towards the rear. Prince Charming carrying the goods and leading the way. The princess clinging to his cowboy belt and Levi's, holding on for dear life. It's so dark, so really dark. The princess is scared. He can sense her anxiety. Do you have protection? She asked. For heaven's sakes, no. I don't carry protection. The last serial killer to come through these parts was 3 years ago. Besides, the only firearm I own is a .22 pistol I bought from a pulpwooder. I got it for like $25, and that's a really good price. I load it with rat shot and only use it for shooting rattlers and moccasins when I'm working in the woods. And two, the serial numbers are filed off, and I think that may make it illegal in some parts of the country. But I'm not worried because we live in the panhandle, and the rules are different here. Oh, and I've got a shotgun too. I forgot about that gun. It's a double barrel Stevens model, 311. It was my grandfather's. One time, Gary, he was a friend back in high school. Gary and I went dove hunting, and we were walking around the field. We were a few feet apart, and I didn't know it, but the safety was off, and I had my finger on the trigger and accidentally discharged it, but luckily it was facing up and no one got shot. But it scared both of us, and you know what? That bird shot that went straight up in the air didn't come down on us. I always thought that if you shot straight up, it would come back down on you. Gary and I were both really surprised about that. Damn, why'd he tell her all of this? Someone asked him the time and he tells them how to make a watch or how to get to Switzerland and where they can buy a good watch in Switzerland. He's going to screw this night up yet, in more ways than one. When the tailgate goes down, the sound echoes like a yodel in the Alps. It's at least a mile to the nearest house, so he breathed a little easier. No one should have heard anything, though, and even if they did, they couldn't get in the gate. But they do ride the woods sometimes with three-wheelers. No one heard anything, he assured himself. He looked at his princess. She was in another world, probably still thinking about the need for protection. Back to the business at hand. He asked her, "Would you like to see me arrange our bed for stargazing?" He's proud of his truck's bed and needs to rearrange things to make room for comfort. So the prince climbs into the bed, thinking maybe one day he'll be lucky enough to have a truck with a step bumper. His princess watches in anxious anticipation. He moves to come along and bumper jack up towards and under the toolbox. The milk crate's a little harder to move, but he gets it up there too. It's got 75 feet of chain in it, and boy, is it heavy. The shovel easily goes under the toolbox, and the second milk crate, the one with a couple of gallons of tree marking paint, finds a home too. Excitedly, the princess watches him set the stage. He senses that she can't wait. Proudly, he asks her, "What do you think of my rubber mats?" She's speechless. She can't even answer the question. "I got these 2 mats from the paper mill. Just for me, they cut them to fit the bed. They use this matting for mud flaps on the back of tractor-trailer trucks." Once again, he thought that she should really be impressed. If she wasn't, she should try lying in this bed without the mats, he thought. She'll see. Together, they started out sitting on the tailgate, gazing into the heavens, sipping on their drinks. It was like a dream, so quiet, so peaceful, so safe. Meteors darting across the dark skies, the Milky Way sparkling. The only thing missing was the castle. Slowly, they each eased towards each other, and 13 months later, they were married. And it's not what you may be thinking. She wasn't pregnant. It was true love, a marriage made in the heavens above and the woods of Northwest Florida below. And now, many years later, the prince still can't tell a simple story or give his princess a simple answer to the question when she asks, "What time is it?" All fairy tales begin with the first chapter. The end.
I'm almost gonna cry. That was so sweet.
That was fucking that was phenomenal. That was phenomenal, Keith. There have been a lot of great endings to the story tonight, and this is another story that has a fantastic ending. And the way you have like the buildup of like all that like tremendous, hilarious awkwardness and discomfort, and then the cutaway to 13 months later they were married and they lived happily ever after and they really loved each other. Like there's something like so like obviously unexpected given the way the story is framed before that. Like you're at any given moment in this story, you're fully expecting her to to just slap this guy and get out of the truck, right? But like so it's totally unexpected, but it's also like so sweet and so true to life, and so like totally undoes the listener's the listener or the reader, I guess, is expectations for where this story is going to go. And I have to say though, the moment that absolutely slew me was the like, do you have protection to there hasn't been a serial killer through here in a couple of years? Like, first of all, that joke is funny. Like, even if it had just been, do you have protection? Oh no, I didn't bring my gun, right? Like that joke is like intrinsically kind of funny, but the execution of that joke here elevates it into the stratosphere and dovetails so perfectly with like this Florida setting that you have here, where it's like kind of, even though this is this beautiful love story, like everything is vaguely seedy and dangerous and there are wild animals. I don't know, it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of like atmospheric, setting driven and character driven storytelling. It's great, Keith. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. The narrator is clueless.
No, that was just such an awesome piece of Florida world building, I guess, and world like just a piece of Florida, like literally in that story, several pieces. But one thing is like it's lyrical in a way that is both like really like it flows very well. It flows like in a way that's like a song, but it also reminds me very much of like country music type lyrics that that really capture that, you know, country living type of stuff. Because it's like I said this in the chat, but I said you should go to Nashville and basically like elevate every, you know, all of the artists that they write the songs for, because that sounds like it's so like it feels like real, but also it feels very very like it hits every note. Like, man, it just hits everything that you could want from a story like that. Like, you got the wholesomeness, you got like, you know, it's set in Florida, and so the Magic Kingdom thing is going on in kind of the background of the listener reader's head. You got like the wholesome, you know, love story thing too. It's basically like a Taylor Swift, Jason Aldean, thing going on. But not hokey though. That's the thing. It's not hokey like that shit. That's why I said you should go to Nashville and like write some songs for people, because that was really amazing.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Rudy.
Yeah, it's like I'm just riffing off of Rudy. Like it's a really good, or it's a talent to write something like that's like heartfelt, but you know, not and authentic. You know, you're not like like forcing the reader to like feel this way. It just happens so authentically and organically, and it's awesome.
Thanks, Iris.
Thank you so much, Keith. And I like what Mullane is saying in the chat about like it. Actually, I should just read what Mullane said. Mullane says, I like the feeling of a little bit of cynicism chipping off. Yeah, just like, I feel like a lot of the pieces tonight have been surprisingly uncynical in their own ways, you know, and I think this is a great addition to that. And sometimes misery tourism needs a little break from the cynicism, I think, in spite of our name. So anyway, thank you so much, Keith.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Grapes is up next. Are you still with us, Graves?
Yes, I'm still here. Sorry.
No problem.
Just moving around a little bit, but here will do. Actually, can you just give me 1 second? I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, voy a leer un momentico. Que voy a leer un momentico. All right, so I have about 4 pieces that I'm reading. One of them's a little bit longer than what I usually read, but it's still on the short side. Okay, so here we go. The Return of Blackout Queen. I've been drinking, hoping I'll get to this point where I forget how to read. Drinking, I certainly got to the point where I forgot how to read the room, and I received a drink from a man who must have stand. I forget everything now. That's one. And here's my second one. Study canon. He asked why I shred my checks when I get paid. I told him I want to hurt myself. I want to give myself pain. Not gonna lie, that one's part of a series inspired by song lyrics. That song lyric that inspired that one was an Elliott Smith song from Roman Candle. Okay, so here we go, another one. Typing into the keyboard like a piano player. I sit in the middle of the bench so people can sit on either side of me. Some days I'm alive and mostly I'm dead. I didn't think ahead, I'm kind of brain dead. No one sat on either side of me on the bench. I forever lament not laying down and taking up the whole bench. Maybe I think back to the other week when a punk chick sat next to me on the bench. She had spiky, colorful hair and a lot of metal on her body. We talked some, we wouldn't become friends. Okay, and lastly, I have one about a bug. Big black bug in my room. Why me? I'm in the next room now and it's sounds are getting louder. I know it grew in size, though through the adjacent ajar door, I see that it really did. It takes up the entire room now, this black bug in my room. And it had a harbinger too. On arriving home, I went to put on my shorts and there it was, a bug in my shorts, dead. But this one is alive, I'm sure. Its movements make noise, more distinct now that it's big. And here I am, ran in my room for a lack of their want, for the bug's lack of want of me. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Those were excellent as usual. I'm getting a little freaked out by all the all the spiders and bugs and like weird like indigenous Florida wildlife that we've had tonight with the spiders still crawling around my room somewhere. But that aside, Graves, oh man, I've said so many times about how I love like the efficiency and concision and precision of your language. So I'm not going to dwell on that this time around. Instead, I'm going to talk about like you do some really tremendous things with like words in several of these poems where like a single word will like travel down almost like fall down the page and take on different meanings as it does. Like what you did with like read in the first poem, right? Where it went from like, I want to get like basically so blackout drunk that I can't read to I certainly got so drunk that I can't read the room. And like, and you do something similar with like bench and the other one and like, the way that like there's something about the way that kind of mirrors the like descending emotional cadence of these poems. That's really awesome. And just generally like the use of repetition and like wordplay and stuff is really strong here. And I don't know, I'm still fucking freaked out about the bug poem though. I'm looking for that spider. Anyway, thank you, Grapes.
Groups, I really
Thank
love
you.
all of those, but I really especially liked the bench thing because you're like I thought you want company, you want someone to sit on either side of you, and then later you say you wish you could have taken up the whole bench, and I love that because it's like you could read. I don't know. I personally read into that as in like I wish it could be enough for myself in a way, or instead of like I need someone to not be there. No, I don't know. That's and then I love like the way you describe the punk girl and like we wouldn't become friends. Like that's the best ending title. Like I don't know,
Real.
not kind of, but yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
typical archetype of a punk chick, I suppose.
Well, I mean, I liked it, and I like punk fiction, but also the title, "The Return of Blackout Queen," is fucking rad.
Yeah,
Thank
I was gonna mention that title too. I like that. I like what William said. The way Reed is used there, how it's almost like double vision, like the way it's used in the poem. It's like getting like cross-eyed or double vision, like the way it moves. Like he mentioned, moving down the page, but it's like it reminds me of that. Like when I hear it, and that's weird synesthesia type thing, but it's cool.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Grapes. And Brandon's up next.
All right, gonna read a short story. It's part of a
Brandon,
possible.
before you start,
Oh.
I gotta ask you something. Is this some shit about spiders?
No,
Is there a giant spider in this? I know it's probably going to be a fantasy piece. Is this some ode to Shelob or something? Should I prepare myself? Am I going to get even more freaked
No.
out? Okay, thank you, man.
no spiders.
Oh, thank Christ.
So, bit of a concept piece that I'm going to be going for. I'm actually going to try to do a novel full of street level stories set in a high fantasy world. So, we'll see how you guys like it. This one's called Dream. Life in the Warrens of Anselden was tough. If it wasn't bad enough that no one had the kind of money it took to get out, the regulated rain runoff from the upper city was always there as a reminder of how far you'd fallen. They didn't have the runoff to deal with. They had sunlight and they had clouds. They had fresh rain and a cool breeze. Most importantly, they had hope that even if they had to be refugees from all the disasters beyond the city, they could at least live comfortable lives. Elias was one of the lucky ones at the start. He grew up with a nice Elorian family in good standing with the Church of Eternal Light. His uncle, Zane, was the High Inquisitor. That was enough for his entire childhood to be spent rubbing shoulders with the city council and mercantile dignitaries. He'd met most of the elite by the time he'd finished school. Had everything paid for so that he could get a good job as a clerk for the Inquisitors and was set to be married to the daughter of a wealthy family of silk traders from the western city of Ardor. But all that went away. His betrothed was in good standing with the Xandranir on the terrace. Her family had made some of their fortune by supplying the hedonistic district with the fabrics that their famed dancers wore when performing. And as she was always a pretty one, she had gotten drawn into a lot of parties at the famed Warm Embrace nightclub, which Elias often accompanied her to. His family never approved of his attendance at these events or of his fraternizing with the Xandranir. They were traditionalists, devoted to the church with their every waking hour, and there was no room for the debauchery that the Embrace was known for in their eyes. Elias never gave them too much information, but he also denied them any heed to their concerns. He wanted to live the life that they desired for him. He wanted to do great things and help the Inquisitors protect the city, but he was young and wanted to enjoy being young while he could. There was no better place to enjoy being young for a well-off couple with money to burn and enough importance in the city to burn it safely than the Warm Embrace. Unfortunately, he found something that burned brighter than any of the money he'd spent. Now he lives in the Warrens. His family disowned him when he came home stumbling, giggling, and reeking of exotic perfumes and various concoctions staining his clothes. It was unseemly. Worse yet, it was embarrassing for his father, who had scheduled a brunch meeting with a member of the clerical management for him that day. Gone was the life of muted luxury and comfort. His betrothed was appalled by the sudden loss of wealth and influence and stopped answering his calls or his letters. Now his home was a ramshackle hovel in the second floor of an old tenement building in desperate need of repair. He was grateful it wasn't on the third story, where the roof leaks were frequent and left untouched by the building's owner. None of that mattered, though. As he laid in his bed for the third day in a row, he wasn't concerned with anything like that. His body was aching. He'd missed 2 days of work now and knew that if he missed another, he'd be looking for new employment. With a pained groan, he forced himself to sit. He pulled on the stained trousers he'd left laying at his bedside, slid his feet into the worn-out work boots with the thinned-out soles, and ineffectively smoothed the shirt he'd been sleeping in. Though it pained him, he made his way downstairs and set about the 2-block path that he'd taken the last time things got this bad. Wincing bodily, he knocked on the door of an old building, the walls pockmarked with age and mold, but the jambs of the doors and windows painted brightly with hues of orange and red that ebbed and flowed like water. "What's the word?" came a gruff voice, sharp and somehow shrill despite the hoarse rasp, like nails scraping on slate. "Dream," Elias replied weakly, leaning heavily on the frame of the door. He didn't have to wait long, as the cacophony of half a dozen locks being turned on the other side precluded the door opening slowly. The familiar face of the Theranir doorman greeted him. It was far from a comforting familiarity, though. The narrow, beady eyes and sharp nose that sat above the ratkins protruding incisors, framed by the waxed and stylized mustache, offered no comfort, no consolation. He was a squat, wide-bodied man, wearing a dirty brown canvas vest and trousers resembling the fatigues of the Cerosians. He smirked at the fallen noble's disheveled appearance. "You got the credits, or do I have to run you off again?" "Yeah, I've got them, Dees. You gotta let me in. I need a fix." "Yeah, you're lucky we got a bed open. Get your ass in here." Elias shuffled in, keeping his arms tucked to his sides and crossed over his stomach. He was greeted by the same blue light crystals dotting the walls that gave everything a soft haze in the ambient smoke that billowed about. He already knew what to expect. He followed as Dees led him through to the entry room and into a narrowed hallway, and opened one of the doors into a smaller room with 2 small beds set up side by side. Elias sat on the bed to the left, as he usually did. He looked back at Dees as he nearly crumbled into a slouch. "Who am I getting the dream from? Is Leptic around?" "Leptic is booked. Sorry. Good news, though. We got a new donor starting today, and you get to be the first recipient. Name's Biped. Dallas Scouts say he's a good trip." "New and untested? I don't know, man." Elias's heart sank. He knew what the dream was like with Leptic, and that was what he needed right now. Dees furrowed his bushy eyebrows together, making his already beady eyes narrow further. "It's either the new guy, or we can hook you up with Frantic again. She's free right now." Elias shuddered and clasped a hand over his left side in memory of the last time he linked up with Frantic. He wasn't fully convinced that his ribcage ever healed properly. "All right, bring Biped in. I guess. Dream is dream, but Frantic's wasn't right." "You got it, kid. Wait here. I'll get him." Dees stepped out, closing the door behind him as if this were a medical clinic, affording privacy like a professional would, even in a drug den like this. Elias sprawled back onto the table, fluffing the tiny pillow and gingerly drawing his legs up to the mattress as he wound up slightly on a side, facing the center of the room. After several minutes, he was starting to get anxious. The stocky Theranir opened the door just as the nerves were starting to take hold. In walked a young woman with the side of her head shaved and the rest of her jet black hair worn long. Elias recognized her as one of the administrators, a technician who knew how to facilitate the dream transfusion. But she was one that never talked much. She'd worked on him 10 or 12 times in the last few months, but never introduced herself. She sat on a small stool in the center of the two beds and unfolded a roll of implements across her lap. Moments later, the donor shuffled in, a short figure in somber black clothing with a wide-brimmed hat covering most of his face. The Ixenir were always a strange sight to behold, with boldly colored hair and ruddy skin, misshapen faces that weren't meant for the physical world, contorted into whatever form they had when they crossed into this reality before being trapped here. Elias had a lot of sympathy for the plight of the goblins, but he had a greater appreciation for what they could deliver. Biped? Elias asked, sullen and uncertain about what was to come. Yeah, the figure in the hat replied, hopping up onto the other bed before lifting the hat away. Braided hair and tangles of black on the right and vivid pink on the left, more adequately representing dreadlocks than meticulous braids, fell out across his narrow, seemingly malnourished shoulders. One of his amber eyes shone brightly, while the others seemed to have been plucked out, leaving behind an empty socket. His voice was flat and rang hollow in the ears of Elias. Dee says you seem a little wired. You won't be for long. Good, thanks, Elias muttered. Before he could engage in further small talk, the administrator tapped an IV into his hand and shifted to bring the other end of the hand of the Ixenir. 2 lines of tubing stretching across the 3-foot gap between beds. He knew that all of the goblins had a mental schism stemming from being torn from their world, and that each particular quirk changed how the dream would feel. But before he could ask anything of Biped, his head swirled and he felt his body go limp. The dream was the antithesis of everything his Elurian upbringing stood for. It was the surrender of structure. It was the order upset. It was discipline broken. The lights on the walls seemed to begin to flicker and fade as his eyes listed halfway into his forehead. He languished and luxuriated at the same time, his senses flooded and starved simultaneously. This was what he was craving, forgetting everything that brought him here for a few short moments. Every fiber of his being tingled and hummed as the transfusion fully took hold. The feeling was exquisite as the pain and the stress fell away into the depths of his mind just as it had before. His body relaxed into the mattress and the pillow, and even an attempt at his favored fetal position went defeated as his tension-free muscles went slack. It felt good to let it go, even for a moment. He knew that he was just waiting for the slumber to settle in, to take him away for a few hours, but instead his eyes remained open. His gaze fell forward, flat and devoid of interest. He wasn't drowsy, no matter how tired he felt. He wanted to ask the technician a question, but he couldn't muster the words. Even breaking his gaze from the empty space and the dented plaster of the wall felt like too much effort. In the periphery of his view, he could see the tubing connecting him to the goblin across the room. A river of red leaving his arm, a stream of blue leaving his donor. Everything felt like Biped's voice. Hollow. He couldn't think about how long he'd been lying there. It could have been minutes, it could have been hours. He wasn't sure that he cared. Suddenly he felt something change. His heart skipped a beat, then another, then began racing, pounding in his head and in his chest, and he saw the goblin rip the tubes from his arm, leap off the other bed, and run out of the room with an enthusiastic and mischievous giggle. Yet still Elias couldn't move. He couldn't make himself move. All that Elias could focus on was his motionless limbs as his head swirled and he desperately wanted to get out of bed. His pulse hammered all around him, almost as if his ears were being used as a drum. Something was wrong, something wasn't right, something was happening, something snapped. He was desperate, he needed to get to help, but there was no sign of the technician, no sign of Biped, and no sign of Dees. with speed he could never remember possessing before. His upper body shot up off of the bed and propelled himself forward from the bed. His breath caught in his lungs as he tried to cry out, managing only a weak gasp as he fell down. His legs never left the mattress, never got under him. His arms never had any strength to catch him. His head impacted the concrete floor. His head swirled. Everything faded and went black.
So I think this may be the first fantasy story to mention a brunch meeting. I like that you've added brunch meetings to fantasy universes. This is good. This is the progress that fantasy literature needs, I think. Now, I love the central conceit here of like getting high off a blood transfusion with like some kind of otherworldly creature. I think that's a really, I think that's a, sorry, there's a fucking mosquito crawling on me now. But I think that my parents' house is just being overrun by bugs. But I do think that like that's a really great way to do drugs in a fantasy universe. Like no pun on doing drugs intended, right? Because so often like when like dark fantasy or hard fantasy incorporates drugs, it's just like some like substance. It's just a ripoff of some shit that exists on Earth, or it's just magic does it, right? It's like oh, you snort these fucking magic crystals, or whereas this is vivid and ghastly in a way that like a lot of those like fantasy drugs just aren't, right? And like in keeping with the universe, like you can bet like if there was another sentient species on this planet, we'd be fucking drinking their blood and trying to get high off it.
Oh, absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it was very original, and it's not like, because everyone's read that book where it's like, oh, it's this drug, but we all know they're just talking about crack, really. But you remember you wrote that one poem that was like, I want a new drug. It's like you answered your own poem. It's awesome. Like, I love that. That was brilliant.
Awesome. Thank you.
For reading.
Yeah, man, that kicked ass. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that rocks.
Oh, sorry, Rudy.
What was Frantic? What was her thing?
So with the goblins in the setting, basically you can pick anything from the DSM.
Okay, and they all have it. Right?
That's what that goblin has. So they usually have a name that kind of links up to what their fracture is. So
right.
Frantic
goblin DSM
was an absolute, just a frenetic lunatic.
Manic?
Biped is actually BPD.
BPD. See, that's what I thought. Okay, yeah, that's
so that hyper focused depression, followed by the spike of anxiety.
That manic phase, I gotcha. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't need that biped in my life. Not taking that.
Yeah, because it's like doing uppers and downers, right? Because it's like you take a hit of one goblin, you take the other goblin. Nothing compares to these blue and yellow purple pills. No, that was awesome. I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. So next up is not Hitler. I guess not Hitler signed up. Who is not Hitler? Is that GG or is that someone else?
Well, I can tell you one thing. I'm not Hitler.
Fair enough. Well,
we know it's not Hitler.
The floor is yours.
All right. I have another school assignment because I think it's funny to read these. This one's from 2014. I'll share a link too if you want to read along. There it is. All right, I'm gonna start reading. So the assignment for this was please share an article, video, photo, etc. that offers some insight into the term American. So I'll just read what I have here. Before I delve into the content of a video titled Howard Stern Makes 7-Year-Old Rapper Cry on America's Got Talent, It should be known that this video received 40,302,174 views as of February 10th, 2014. From the title alone, I gather that a man who is famous because his voice sounds a certain way is going to verbally assault a child into tears for not being able to do something that I assume his relatives have agreed is cute. Using my skills as a person with an internet connection, I scan the rest of the page and come across other statistics. An overwhelming 115,829 out of 131,349, about 88% of YouTube viewers who decided to voice their opinion via thumbs up or thumbs down decided to give this video a thumbs up rating. Now that there is a good foothold on the percentage of Americans who think this sort of videotaped activity is deserving of a thumbs up, let's begin. The youth from uptown Philadelphia introduces himself as Mere Money or Mer Money. Howie Mandel, a self-professed germaphobe, questions the length of Mere Money's career as well as his favorite rappers. Mere Money replies that he has been rapping for 4 years and his favorite rappers include myself. He is 7 years old. Howie questions what the boy would do if he had $1 million, to which the aspiring hip-hop artist replies, take care of my family. The crowd applauds and Sharon Osbourne does something with her hands. Howard visibly turned away, presumably put off by this cheap attempt to garner support seconds before the start of a performance. The boy squeaks for the audio man to drop that beat and walks around the stage a few feet in each direction, repeating Young Money a few times, unaware of the pun he could almost be making if it were possible for a 7-year-old in America to generate income. The crowd is silent. Mer Money starts rapping like a 7-year-old. He has no sense of the beat, and the idea of keeping his voice to a cadence is as foreign as his concept of stage presence. Even still, he remains blissfully unaware of the impending demise of this dream he holds so dear. Oh, Mere Money, where did you go wrong? 22 seconds pass, and Howard Stern presses his buzzer. The camera cuts away, then to Stern. He puts up his arms with his elbows in and palms up, effectively communicating, what are you going to do? Mere Money continues, mentioning haters in the building, and points at Stern. He starts rapping one phrase repeatedly, and Sharon Osbourne presses her buzzer. The boy makes a face like a defeated 7-year-old. Howie Mandel, presumably afraid of the germs on his buzzer, points out that the boy made a face, then offers Stern a chance to talk. Stern excuses what he does as being difficult, calls the boy brave, and the boy starts crying. The camera pans to an attractive woman in the audience, asking if the boy is crying. Stern comes up on stage while saying, let me fix everything. He hugs the boy, apologizes, calls the boy a terrific young man and so brave, then says what he is doing is difficult. He says none of the rappers he met during his life as a famous radio DJ are quite as good as Mere Money is. Howie Mandel thanks Mere Money and claps with both hands raised up high. Howard Stern walks back to his seat, repeating, I can't do it, and says that this isn't for him. Nothing else of interest happens, and in their final judgments, Stern gives a yes for his vote, while Mandel and Osbourne both reply no, citing that leading this kid on would be even crueler. Let's recap. On a show based on finding talent among the normal population, the producers knowingly let a 7-year-old rapper perform. Noble. The kid could have talent. Who could know at this point? The kid performs and is objectively terrible. The judges react as they would toward any other performer and give a subpar performance a fitting review, which results in a child crying. Furthermore, the first judge, Howard Stern, attempts to show remorse for making the 7-year-old cry via repeated apology in addition to submissive body language. The audience is a little mad when Mere Money cries. Stern sums up this whole thing as being his worst night. I'd like to note here that a day after the school shooting at Columbine, Stern talked about how the two gunmen should have attempted to have sex with some of their female classmates prior to killing them. Now, the point here isn't to demonize Howard Stern or tasteless humor in general. The point is to show how this video is American. Howard Stern, a man whose career, even today, would make people blush, apologizes for making a child cry and declares this night to be his worst night. The crowd feels his apology is authentic and he isn't summarily booed out of the room. Okay, this is all well and good and typical of pop media and those who participate in its mass consumption. But what does this ultimately show about America? How could Howard Stern be so marginalized in the big picture here? Why wasn't there a public outcry to him even being on the show? Why was the situation even allowed to happen? Because there was a bigger spectacle. People want to be on the edge of this strange judgment, to feel something as they watch others go up on a stage and get codified via button presses, loud noises, and large neon X symbols. People want their opinions to matter, and somehow yelling or loudly making noise near the spectacle becomes more important than the result, like a child being made to cry. What other possible outcome could there have been? This kid magically has a great bass-filled voice and a flow that would rival that of Christopher Wallace's? Come on, Mere Money was good for a few ahs from the female section of the studio audience and viewers at home and on the internet. But beyond that, what could a 7-year-old possibly do that a normal adult couldn't? The kid was destined to fail, but no one had the stones to admit that. The blame rests not on the producers of the show, the people who approved his audition tape, Howard Stern, Howie Mandel and his Purell, or even Mere Money's relatives and friends who did nothing more than encourage a child who had a dream. The blame rests on America's shoulders for making this child cry. This video represents the term American as it showcases the avoidance of simple truth, unabashed self-importance, hypocrisy, and lying to children. That's all I got.
GG, I really dig this essay. You showed it to me earlier this week, or it may have been yesterday, it may have been this morning. I've lost track of time, but you showed it to me before now. And I really dig what you're doing here because you're really getting at like the essential fucking like paradox and impossibility of like a piece of media, right? Like this, right? The fucking false promise of even the thumbnail, where the thumbnail on one level like promises that you're going to get to see Howard Stern make this kid cry. But you know, in the back of your head, it's got to be a bait and switch, right? Because it's on a network television show. Howard Stern
Right.
is gonna like call this kid a faggot, right? And tell him,
Yeah.
you know, there's gonna be a bait and switch there, but you click anyway because some part of you really
Yeah,
wants to see Howard Stern be just absolutely awful and vicious to a 7-year-old. And then the way it pays off, where it's like, oh, well, like he didn't want to do the Columbine thing that you slip in here is so like cutting and perfect because it really gets at like the absolute hypocrisy here, right? Like,
Yeah.
and also like the like central lie of this kind of media, this kind of, and I don't know, and in the calculation of it, it's a really good fucking essay where you go deep and you really tease out like the inconsistencies and hypocrisies and paradoxes of like a piece of media that most of us would watch and forget that we had watched it before it's even over, you know? It's good.
Yeah, I don't know. I tried to picture like, what if this kid made it to the final round and like he's up against someone who's like actually talented and like juggling or something, and it's like, what the fuck are we watching here? This is so stupid. Yeah. That was kind of my whole thing. Yeah. Thanks for letting me read, man.
Well, thank you, GG. Thank you.
Yeah, that was amazing. I like William said, I like, you know, the idea of like the paradox and the bait and switch operation here, because that is like central to so many parts of America. Like, you know, even like the educational system and, you know, everything like that is just like tied up in that idea of like you said, this, you know, this idea of like self-importance and like everybody special can do their special, shine their special way or whatever. And
Right,
when
yeah.
you know, so many parts of our society are predicated on basically bullying people or making or laughing when people fall down. Basically, I mean, just like, I mean, America's Funniest Home Video is like literally a show like for people getting hit in the nuts and it's funny or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like that. But yeah, no, it was really good.
Thank you.
Yes, good shit, GG. And I think that's it. I think we're gonna call it there. Unless someone really has a piece that they absolutely want to read, but I think we've got a good 2 hours in. So yeah, I think we'll call it there. As usual, I'm going to leave the Zoom meeting open for people to hang out. But yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm still looking out of the corner of my eyes for that fucking spider. Anyway, if you're watching this on YouTube, this has been Misery Loves Company. We do this every fucking Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. If you want to come and share your work, anyone's welcome. And anyone is also welcome to just come and hang out and lurk and enjoy the show. We tweet out the link about around the time the show goes live from our Twitter account @Misery Tourism. And fuck it, that's it. Thank you so much to everyone who read. Thank you guys. It's been a great night.